and what you can expect going forward. Right, so first and foremost, we're going to have a look at what topics you can expect in each of your papers. Obviously, you've got a 150 mark paper 1 and 2, 2 hours each, and each of those papers has a particular structure. So we're going to have a look at that and what content is included in each of those papers. Right, first and foremost, we have got paper 1, which is including business environment and business operations, and you should know by now that every paper is structured exactly the same, including the same categories, business environments and business operations in paper 1, and then ventures and roles, which we'll discuss in a moment, in paper 2. Right, it is exactly the same going into grade 12, so you should be aware of it now. Business environments includes the sections influences on business environments, challenges of the business environment, adapting to challenges of the business environment, contemporary socioeconomic issues, and business sectors. Right, so those are the sections or topics that you can find within business environments. Very important that you know this so that you are prepared for the correct paper. We do not want a situation where you have studied something that is not in paper 1 and is in fact in paper 2, and you have a little surprise when you get to the paper. Right, the second section, which is found in paper 1, is your business operations, marketing function, production function, and introduction to human resources function. Now, it may look like there's less content, but I can assure you the marketing function and production function are quite hefty sections. So there's a lot of content that goes into those two sections, and obviously the last one, human resources function, is just the introduction. Right, we do expand on it in grade 12.
If I may add, Mr. Edwards, the business operations section, especially in the marketing function and the production function, it is actually very technical and difficult to understand topics. So it's actually not very easy to study. I would prefer that you start studying those things a lot longer before the time, and go to your teacher if there's something that you don't understand, because these things are very technical and the textbooks don't always explain it properly. So it's very important that you take note of that. If something is technical, it makes it difficult to remember as well.
Okay, and just on what Ms. Van Zyl said there, is that you actually have an opportunity now. You should be in revision mode with your teachers at the moment, and you should have your exam timetable as well. So you have a bit of time to go through a couple of concepts with your teachers now, rather than just the day before. Right, so make sure that you are prepared. Right, moving on to paper 2, although we do have just one thing to remember here. You have the exam guidelines. If you don't have them, please consult your teacher and get access to those exam guidelines. That's what the note says at the bottom. Okay, very important document. It's got all the details as to what is included in what paper, and also example questions that your teachers would have used in order to set your papers. Right, moving on to paper 2. Paper 2 will always include business ventures, business roles, and then within your business ventures you have the sections of benefits of a company over other forms of ownership. Now, forms of ownership you would have done in the past, but now we've expanded on that by looking at the benefits of a company over other forms like a partnership or a sole trader, and also here you'll do some comparisons between forms of ownership.
It's also very important there, Mr. Edwards, because it now looks like you are only going to study that section that says benefits of a company over other forms of ownership, and you actually leave all the stuff out that you need to know. You need to know sole traders, the characteristics, the advantages, the disadvantages, all of those things, like you have done in grade 10. So it's just a continuation of that. So please don't think that you're going to disregard all the stuff that you've done in grade 10. That is examinable in grade 11 and actually in grade 12 as well.
Yeah, so grade 10 to 12 business studies is actually one full course that we expand upon all the way through to grade 12. All right. The second section that we are going to be including in business ventures is avenues of acquiring a business. So that's your things like leasing and franchising. Then we're looking at transforming a business plan into an action plan, setting up or starting a business, presentation of business information, entrepreneurial qualities and success factors. So that is your business ventures section, your question 2 and your part of your question 4 and obviously your question 5, section C question. Right, then we move on to business roles, which include creative thinking and problem solving, stress, crisis and change management, professionalism and ethics, and team dynamics and conflict management. All right, that would be your question 3, part of your question 4, and then your question 6, section C type question. All right, so that would be finalizing what is included in your paper 1 and paper 2. Right, so let's look at the structure of each of your papers. Now, if we look at the sections, you've got 3 sections. Section A is compulsory, right? That could include or would include your multiple choice type question, which you should be quite familiar with, a missing word. So you fill in the missing word, you're given a number of options and you have to decide which option fits best in a sentence. Match the columns, which you should also be quite familiar with. Right, so that is compulsory, only one answer accepted. We do have occasions where learners give us 2 possible answers. Now, obviously in multiple choice there's only one possible answer. If you do give 2, we can only mark that wrong. Right, so it means that you've given us 2 options and we obviously have a memorandum in front of us with 1 possible answer. So don't make that mistake and give 2 answers. Right, also it is multiple choice, so you have an opportunity to give an answer, 25% chance that it could be correct. So please don't make the mistake of leaving a multiple choice question blank. Okay, at least give a go. All right, section B. Section B, you have 3 questions. You have to choose 2 of those questions. Okay, in your paper 1, question 2 is environments, as I mentioned earlier, and paper 2, it's ventures. Question 3 is operations in paper 1 and roles in paper 2, and then your miscellaneous, obviously a combination of both. Right, so you have to choose 2 out of those 3 possible questions. Right, then section C, also you have a choice here. You have to choose 1 of the possible 2 questions. Okay, question 5 would be your environments or ventures, depending on the paper that you're doing. And then question 6 would be your operations and roles. Right, we can only, and this actually applies to section B as well, we will only mark the first one. All right, so if you have for some reason given us 2 answers, so you've done question 5 and 6, we will only mark question 5, irrespective of whether you've answered question 6 better than you have question 5. So please keep that in mind. Follow the instructions that are given to you.
Yeah, Mr. Edwards, it's very important there because I see it sometimes in the end of the year when I mark the NSC exams. A learner would attempt, let's say, question 5 and then abandon it halfway through and say, I don't think I should have chosen this question, switch to question 6, and then all of a sudden he forgot to go back and cross that question out. Now the marker is instructed, you can only mark the first one. So what they're going to do is they're going to go to that question 6, which is now his primary question. They pull 2 red lines through it and they write the acronym ENQR, exceeded the number of questions required. And that means they are only going to mark that bit that he has done in question 5. So if you find yourself in that position where you are abandoning an essay to do rather the other one, please make sure that you cross that question out because your teacher will be obligated to only mark the one that is offered first.
And that applies to section B as well. All right, so keep that in mind. Okay, so we are going to go through to some example questions for section A, B, and C. All right, first and foremost, the multiple choice. All right, multiple choice, obviously you're going to choose the most appropriate answer, and in this instance we are going to circle the most appropriate answer, and again, to reiterate, we're only going to circle one, so there's only one possible answer there. 1.1.1, one of the components of the market environment. Right, market environment is the component just outside the business, and the only one there would be competitors. Right, the other three form part of the micro and the macro environments. Right, competitors the only one that forms part of the market environment. 1.1.2, Maxi's Furniture and Maxwell Chairs have agreed to work together to achieve their business objectives of a alliance. All right, so those are merger, acquisition, and takeover. You've come across at some point as well. But when two businesses agree to work together, there's no takeover or no ownership involved there, so then it can only be alliance. 1.1.3, a person's intellectual property is protected by copyright legislation, so nobody else can copy that content. 1.1.4, intermediaries operate in the tertiary sector, right, of the economy. Businesses have what control over the market environment? Limited control. Right, some might say no control, but have influence. Right, so keep that in mind if those are some of your options. Multiple choice, that is, do not offer two answers. Okay, we did mention that earlier. So as you can see, it is a warning because we have seen it on numerous occasions. And again, please offer an answer. Don't leave it blank. All right. Moving on to the second type of section A type questions, missing words. So now you have your options in the pink block over there. Right, you'll see what we do as we go along. 1.2.1, exhaustion of what resources is forcing the closure of Waza mines? Okay, natural. Note that I have crossed out the natural option, right? So that's just a little bit easier just to note. It's a good exercise to do when you are doing missing word. Bondi Phones pays monthly rental as part of their overhead costs. Again, we've crossed out overhead. Tammy Takis uses penetration pricing when the host of end of range sales. Penetration we have crossed out. 1.2.4, the inspection of the final product is to ensure that it meets the required standards is known as quality control. All right, control has been crossed out there. 1.2.5, the attitudes and tastes of Wuxi stores target market was studied and is an example of psychographics. Psychographics has been crossed out there. Right, we do the same exercise for the last type of section A question that you will get, and that is match the columns. Right, so you've got the option on column A, and you need to match it to the best possible solution in column B. Inflation. Okay, general increase in prices of goods and services in the country. We've crossed that out. Quality circles. F. Okay, meet regularly to discuss how quality and productivity could be improved. Note here that we are only putting the letter. All right, please keep that in mind when you are completing this exercise, that you need to put the letter and not the full sentence. Often it's something that comes across our desk when marking. Okay, it is far more appropriate to give the letter of the best possible answer. Right, fringe benefits, we are looking at A, and that is offered by businesses to retain skilled employees. 1.3.4, scheduling. That's G, okay, works out the time required to perform each activity and by when the process needs to be completed. And then lastly, workplace forum, okay, that is I, representative of employees who are delegated to act on behalf of employees within the business.
Mr. Edwards, I know that we are not really focusing today on the content itself, but that is actually something that I think needs a bit of explanation. You get two concepts when you're dealing with workers in a business. You get trade unions and you get workplace forums. Now, guys, a trade union is an organization that is paid for by its members, but those members come from various different businesses in an entire industry. Now, a workplace forum is for a particular business. It's an internal thing. They don't normally organize things like strikes or negotiate for higher wages or things like that. That is a trade union. Workplace forums is just a tool that management uses in order to give workers more say in the business's decision making, and that is what that is for. In fact, the law says if you have a business with 100 or more employees, you may form a workplace forum. So that's just the difference. So don't confuse the two. A workplace forum is not a trade union. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah,
Mr.
sure. So
Mr. Edwards.
if we look at the options available, the option B would have been the definition of a trade union. So it was there just to trick you, and you'll often find that there will be two options, two possible options, and you've got to make sure that you distinguish between those. And that's exactly what you were required to do for the workplace forum.
Yeah, the word that actually gave it away is that last part of the sentence where it says within the business. That is what gave it away. The other one is an organized association. Association means it exists apart from the business, outside of the business. So you just need to be aware of these little small nuances. It becomes actually very important in grade 12 as well.
For sure. All right, so we're going to move on to section B type questions. Now, bear in mind, section B, you've got question 2, 3, and 4. Question 2 in your paper 1 would be your environments, and question 3 would be operations. Then you've got the miscellaneous, which is the combination of both. Right, so you need to make sure that you choose 2 of those possible 3. Let's have a look at a few of the examples. Right, so obviously some tips with regards to section B. You obviously you choose the 2. Look at the action verb. The action verb will be the first word that you see in the sentence or the question. That will guide you as to what you're required to do when answering that question. Will guide you as to whether that question is a lower order, middle order, or a higher order question. The mark allocation will also give you a bit of an idea as to what type of question, what level that question is focused on. Determine if the number of facts, how many are required. So there'll be you'll be given an indication as to whether you're required to give 2, 3, 4, or 5, and that will be given to you. Obviously, I mentioned look at the mark allocation, and please read the question carefully. There's a number of examples where they may be looking at the effect on the business, or the effect on the customer, or the effect on employees, and we often find that learners make errors because they have jumped the gun and they have not read the question carefully. All right, so those are some tips that you need to keep in mind when answering section B questions. All right, let's look at some examples. Now, name any 4 examples of contemporary legislation that may affect businesses. Now, you'll see we are going to circle some of the aspects that are giving us an indication as to how to answer this question. First one is name. Name, if you look at your exam guidelines, will tell you that that's a lower order question. Right, no explanation is required for this, and you'll see by the indication of 4 examples and the mark allocation of 4 tells us that it is also a lower order question. Right, we will only mark the first 4 options. Now keep that in mind when we're going through the memorandum of this question. We will give an indication as where some learners have gone wrong. All right, so here we have the Memorandum, Labor Relations Act, Basic Conditions of Employment Act, Compensation of Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. So they are the first 4. So those are the only ones that we are going to mark. Okay, there are some other 2 options. us as markers, we will cross out the extra 2. Okay, now the issue comes in if you have given 6 possible answers, as has been indicated there, and numbers 5 and 6 are correct, but numbers 1 and 2 are incorrect. We are obligated to only mark the first 4. Okay, so unfortunately that is disadvantaging yourself. Okay, so you need to make sure that your correct answers are at least indicated in the first 4 options. All right, the second possible question that we are going to come across is outline 3 requirements of a good trademark. Now, you should find this question on page 14 of your workbook, so you can work through that. And again, looking at the action verb outline is indicating that it's lower order, right? And it is required to have full sentence though, right? Then 3. Again, we can only mark the first 3, and then the mark allocation of 6 tells us that you're going to get 2 marks for each bullet. Now, again, it needs to be full sentences though. Right, so let's have a look at the memorandum. Provide the name and address of the owner. Now, we have bolded the words name and address of the owner because that's the essence of the bullet. You have to have that there, right? You have to have that in your answer in order to get the 2 possible marks.
Mr. Edwards, it's also important to note, since outline is actually a lower order question, you're only required to say the name and address of the owner. If you had only that part of the sentence there, it's good enough for the 2 marks because we are looking for the essence. It's going to be very important later on. There's another question that is also marked 2 marks at the end, but there is no essence there. It must have the exact meaning like it is there, but we will get to that a bit later.
All right, so that actually makes us realize how important the action verb is. Right, so you'll see a little bit later we use the word advise, and that becomes a higher order question, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Right, so as you can see on the screen there, we have marked the first 3. Again, the same applies as to I mentioned earlier, irrespective of whether 4, 5, and 6 are correct, we can only mark the first 3. Okay, then we got to go on to define the term problem solving, 2 marks there, and this is on page 14 again. Define being low order, but requires a statement and a qualifier, right, to get the 2 possible marks. Okay, so let's have a look at a possible answer. Note that it is split marking there, so it tells us that it is statement and a qualifier. So problem solving is a process of studying a situation to find the strategies to bring about change. Right, so there's a second possible answer that will be given, that could be given by yourselves in order to get your 2 marks for this.
Mr. Edwards, I think it's also very important that you look at this and you see that there's no facts specified or number of facts specified. Here the marker has got leeway to mark until he's got the amount of marks. So let's say for your first answer you only had a statement there and you only got 1 mark, but luckily you remembered to put down other information. He can then go and look for the other mark somewhere else because we will mark until the maximum marks are reached. So this is an important change from where marks or where a question specifies the number of facts. Now guys, it's also very important when we look at statements and qualifiers. I will explain that to you a bit later, but it is important to be able, because you're not going to write what is on that memo, you're going to write something from memory, so it would be advisable that you learn how to actually construct a qualifier and what is a statement, and I will show that later.
All right, so we're moving on to what would be a middle order type question. Explain reasons why entrepreneurs decide to purchase existing businesses. Page 14 of your workbook, you'll see that there. 6 marks, all right, 6 marks. Middle order requires a statement and a qualifier, all right, and then we look at split marking here. So 3 facts are required, but again, statement and a qualifier, full sentences in order to get your possible marks. So let's have a look here. It says, an established business should not take up too much time to set up, as all requirements needed to run the business is already in place. Okay, so if we refer to what Mr. Van Zyl was saying earlier, to justify your statement, you're giving that qualifier. So let's just go back to that possible answer. An established business should not take up too much time to set up. Cool, that's your statement, right? In order to qualify that, you say how or why, okay? As all requirements needed to run the business is already in place. So that is the answering of the question why. Okay, and that's qualifying your statement that you made at the beginning of that sentence. All right, let's look at the second possible answer. An established business should have an existing customer base. Why? Because people are creatures of habit. Okay, so that's probably the way to teach yourself and learn how to answer your middle order questions, is to ask the question why, how, what after you've made your statement. All right, so that's the third possible answer there. All right, let's have another look at a middle order type question, page 15. Explain the differences between conventional and non-conventional solutions. So differences often can be referred to as distinguish between conventional and non-conventional solutions, or tabulate the differences. Now, when you've got a question like the differences, or explain the differences, or distinguish between, you can put that in table format. It's not essential, but if they do say tabulate the differences, then obviously you are required to give that in a table. All right, so let's have a look at this question itself. Explain the differences. As I mentioned, that could be asked distinguish or replaced with distinguish between. All right, so middle order question, split marking again. Draw a table if necessary, if you wish to. And then let's have a look. Okay, two clear differences. So if we're looking at this mark allocation, the mark allocation is 8. Right, so that indicates that there needs to be two clear differences provided. If it's 4 marks, then it would be 1 clear difference. All right, so this example has 8 marks, and as you can see in the answer, there's a submax of 4 given for the explanations of each. So conventional solutions, let's have a look at the first possible answers, are solutions that are created as part of and that follows what is right and generally believed by everyone. All right, so then the clear difference there, non-conventional solutions are solutions that are not created as part of the norm and do not follow what is generally done or believed in. So you can see the clear difference between those 2 points, and that's what we're looking for. Right, so if you had just given us those first 2 differences, then it would only constitute the 4 marks for this question. But if you've given us 2 clear differences, then you'll get your quota of 8 marks there.
Right, Mr. Edwards, it's also very important. I know we're becoming technical about the marking, but you need to understand how a marker is instructed to mark for you to get the maximum marks that you can. Guys, the marker is instructed to mark only one of the 2 options or one of the 2 concepts if the difference is not clear. Then that means out of the possible 8, you can only get 4. So you need to make sure that the difference is, it doesn't have to link, but you must, the marker must know that you are definitely speaking about the one and definitely speaking about the other. So the difference must be clear.
All right, so we're moving on to the next question, question 2.5 on page 15. This is what you'll see very often in your papers, a scenario which is given, and then you have to base your answers on that scenario. So we have a scenario there, Kasiva Shuttle Services, KSS, ensured that different services are running to achieve their goals. They decrease costs and increased output to maximize profits. They also want to present their business information to various stakeholders. So 2.5.1, identify 2 aspects that KSS considered when initiating a business. Motivate your answer by quoting from the scenario. Now, please remember, when we say motivate your answer, irrespective of whether it says quoting from the scenario, most of the time your markers, your examiners are looking for a quote. So please, even if irrespective of whether they don't say quote, please quote from the scenario. Let's have a look at some important aspects of that question. Identify is your action verb. Okay, it also says 2 aspects that need to be considered there. Okay, and then the first 2 only marked. Again, specify make sure that you have not given more than 2 answers, because we can only mark up until the maximum of 2. And then quotes, right? Quotes, we always suggest give the full sentence, okay, because it's got to include the essence of the quote, and that is very important. We do see some learners where they provide a very short quote, and very often it's not enough to actually allocate those marks. All right, use the entire sentence verbatim, as I've just mentioned. All right, so let's have a look at the aspects that need to be considered when initiating the business: operations, productivity, and the motivation, which is a quote. You can put it in quotation marks as well. Okay, Caius and Sive ensured that different services are running to achieve their goals. Okay, that would be linked to the operations aspect. And then they decreased costs and increased output to maximize profits. Right, so that's looking at productivity. All right, so that's another type of question that you can come across. Right, moving on to advise. Okay, advise KSS on the importance of presenting business information. I am going to hand over to Mr. Van Sail
Yes.
with regards to the these higher order questions, right, and he'll take you through those.
Mr. Edwards, if you can work the computer, I can work the speech.
No worries.
Right. As we said earlier, or I said earlier, advise is a higher order question. Another synonym for it would be recommend or suggest. If you find any of those questions, it's actually a higher order question, and we will show you now how it is marked. So Mr. Edwards, if you don't mind just hitting the click there, you can see advise there. It's a higher order question. We're not going to mark it with split marks. But guys, beware of this one. So Mr. Edwards, if you can just click there. There is no essence. We need to have the entire meaning of that concept very clearly spelled out before we will award 2 marks. It might be so that you only have half the concept, more or less, and then we can award you 1 mark. But it is not like outline where there's an essence there and we're only looking for the essence for 2 marks. In this case, the entire meaning must be clear because it is a higher order question. Right, now you can also look at the mark allocation. By now it's 4 marks, so we are requiring 2 facts. Right, again, the number of facts was not specified, so we will mark until we've got 4 marks. So it doesn't matter if your second one was wrong and your third one was right, we will mark until we've got 2 marks, or 4 marks in this case. Now guys, I'm not focusing too much on the actual content. The content is available in your in this case in your DBE textbooks. Hopefully you guys have got the DBE textbooks. That actually puts it out very nicely and clearly, and that's basically where I get most of the answers from. Right, Mr. Edwards, I also want to speak about Section C now. Now guys, Section C is your essay questions. Now I don't have a specific slide that speaks about tips on how to work or how to have or write an essay question, but I'm going to give you some anyway. Guys, business studies is not like English or history or something like that. We do not actually write an essay. We write an extended question. It's actually all it is. So please don't write it or approach it the same way that you would approach a history paper, because there are some technical marks that you might miss out that is only applicable to business studies. Now guys, if we can just get to the PowerPoint, and you will see that the first thing that you need to notice is there's always a little scenario or a case study. Now guys, in most cases, that scenario or case study just set the type of question. It means absolutely nothing. You can answer the question without looking ever at your leading statement. Now that is what that bit is called. It's called a leading statement. Now guys, very importantly, we see it a lot. People quote because we can't write an introduction properly. So now we quote from that leading statement as our introduction. Now guys, the marker is then instructed to mark it with an R. An R means repeat. So that means you cannot quote anything or use anything from the scenario because it will be marked as a repeat, even if you put it in your own words. It doesn't matter, it comes from the scenario, it's an R, it's not a new fact. Now guys, any question paper or any essay question in business studies, or let's call it a long question, starts with an introduction. Now guys, it's very important, and I will reiterate this point a bit later as well, that the word introduction must be there. You must write the word introduction so that the marker clearly knows that this is the introduction. Right, now an introduction, I'm looking for two facts, and I will clear out what those two facts are in a moment. Right, now guys, you will see that we get to the body of the essay. Now an essay question always has 4 questions stipulated. It's never less, never more. It's 4. And it actually has a specific format. Now guys, any of those 4 questions must be in the body of the essay. It cannot be an introduction or a conclusion, because we see that quite often. People think that the outline, the difference part, for example, in this question, that is going to speak to your introduction and recommend ways in which professional, that is going to be my conclusion. Guys, if you do that, you are going to miss out on massive amounts of marks. Why? Because an introduction can count a maximum of 2, and you will see later on what the max marks is if that was in the body. So guys, please do not put the first bullet point as an introduction and the last bullet point as a conclusion. I know they do this sometimes in life orientation when they give you a question to write. They say, this is what you need to discuss, this is as your introduction you do this, and it doesn't work like that in business studies.
Ms. Fantel, I just want to add something. If you look at the 4 possible questions, right, you might recall when we were going through the different levels of questions, we have the lower, middle, and higher order questions. You can see the similarity in those 4 questions, right? The first one being outline, the second one explain, discuss, recommend. So outline is your lower order question, explain and discuss is your middle order questions, and then recommend is your higher order questions. Now if you break up a business studies paper, 30% of the paper is lower order questions, 50% is middle order, and then the remaining 20% is higher order. So the bulk of your marks for an essay are going to come out of the bullets number 2 and 3, explain and discuss. So please keep that in mind when you're answering the questions. It's important to give the bulk of your information in those possible questions. You'll see a little bit later at the mark allocations as per the memo when we go through that later.
Right, and it's also very nice to see this now because we forgot to mention it earlier. Synonyms for explain in a business studies paper is discuss, elaborate on the meaning, describe. All of those things requires you to respond in exactly the same way. There's going to be a split mark for a statement and a qualifier. So there's no discernible difference in business studies between explain, discuss, describe, and all of those things. It all means basically the same thing. I know there's a distinct difference in English and history if you have to do look at those action verbs. Right, and the same is with name. There could be other synonyms for it like list or give that requires exactly the same response. Good. Okay, now guys, a business studies essay question also needs to have a conclusion, and once again that word conclusion must be there so that the marker can definitely see this is not part of the body, this is actually the conclusion. So the word must be there, and there's a free mark in there for you if you follow these principles. Right, now guys, let's start looking at the memo. Guys, the question is I think it was question 6, which is on paper 16 of your book, so you can use this as your memo. So Mr. Edwards, the first thing that we are going to look at is, of course, the introduction, and if you don't mind hitting the button there for me again. Now guys, remember the word introduction must be there. You need 2 facts on any of the 4 bullet points. Now guys, a question paper has those 4 different questions, and your introduction must speak to any one of those 4 questions. You need 2 facts. You can speak on one of the bullet points and another one of another bullet point, and that gives you 2. Now guys, a rule of thumb, an introduction actually answers the question, what is something or why? And Mr. Edwards, is it possible to go back to the original question?
Yeah, sure.
There we go. Now guys, you can see those 4 bullet points there. Now let's look at the first one. Outline the differences between professionalism and ethics. So you can actually use one of those points and you can say, okay, as an introduction, what is professionalism or what is ethics? Just remember that you cannot repeat it later on in the body again. So it must be something that you are willing to sacrifice for 1 mark. Or you can say, why is it necessary to follow the principles of professionalism? Those are the things that we are looking for in an introduction. Now guys, it's not always that easy to write an introduction, and if you struggle too much with writing the introduction, rather just leave it blank, do the body later on, and then come back to the introduction. But please do come back to the introduction, because if you leave it blank, you are going to lose out on a free mark. So let's go back there. Now guys, there are the 3 bullet points there, answers the question what and why. So let's have a look. Professionalism and ethics is important for businesses as it combines the knowledge and skills of employees with accountability. That's a why question. All employees are required to make ethical decisions whilst executing their day-to-day tasks. Why? You guys understand that? That is how we are writing an introduction. And I'm only looking for 2 sentences for 1 mark each. Right, now you would also notice that there was an L that popped up just next to the word introduction. Now guys, it's actually a mark that is a technical mark that I will explain a bit later, but if the word introduction is there and something is written underneath it, whether right or wrong, but something is written as an introduction, you will be credited with an L mark, and that stands for layout, which I will explain to you a bit later. Right, now in the body of the essay, which I've said to you is all those 4 bullet points, it must be those bullet points that goes into the body. It cannot go in an introduction or conclusion. Now guys, as a rule of thumb, you can use the questions as headings in the body. Now guys, please make or get into the habit of writing headings. Guys, even if you just quote the question that you are going to address as your heading, there is some value in that, which I will also explain to you later. Now, do not leave any question out. Guys, even if you don't know anything about that question, write the heading down, even if you leave it blank, but the heading must be there, because there's a free mark in there for you, and you will see later on how that works. Now guys, in this case, it was differentiated or explain the differences between, or outline the differences between professionalism and ethics. The max mark is 12. Now guys, in a business studies essay, they will never tell you what the mark allocation is per question. You will have to guess it. But guys, it will never be more than 16. And in most cases, like this case where there's no subheadings, it won't be counting more than 12. Now guys, even if you only scored, in this case, I've only given them 2 differences. That is good enough for 8 marks, although the max is 12. The chances are I can still get full marks for my essay question, and you will see why that is a bit later. Right, Mr. Edwards, if you can move on. In the body, we are continuing, and this is now the principles of professionalism and ethics. The question asks you to explain or discuss the principles of professionalism and ethics. Now, guys, there's a principle which is a name kind of scenario. We name competency as a principle. We get 2 marks for naming it. Now, guys, in a section C question, you will also get 2 marks if you explain what competency is. Now guys, this question said you had to discuss or explain 4 principles. Now once again, the 4 stipulated how many principles are required, so we are only going to mark the first 4 principles. So you're going to name competency, give me an explanation of competency, and it will be marked by split marking, integrity, respect, and so forth. Now guys, if you're going to watch this presentation a bit later on, you can pause it here and use this as your memo. Right, so as you can see there, the principle was 2 marks, the naming of it, and the explanation of it is 2 marks. So you're going to use each principle as a subheading. Right, Mr. Edwards, the next one says you had to explain or discuss the advantage of running an ethical business venture. The max marks that you could get for this is 10. Now guys, just keep in the back of your mind that outline question that we had right at the beginning, that mark allocation was 12. The next one was 16. If you count up 12 and 16, it already gives you 28 marks. Right, now this one has a max mark of 10, so that gives me 38 marks already, and you can see that there's a split mark. Now Mr. Edwards, if you don't mind carrying on, you can see the last one, which was explain or advise on the ways in which a professional, responsible, ethical, and effective business practices should be conducted. You can see that the max mark there is 8. And if I take the 38 marks plus 8, it gives me 46. That's already more than 40 that every essay question counts. So you can see that even if I didn't know everything in each of those questions, I can still actually get full marks. You will see now. Right, so in that case, it's maximum of 8, and the double ticks are at the end. And guys, now you would see that there's a little A that popped up. Now the first A you will get because you attempted all of the questions. Now guys, they regard a heading of a question as an attempt to answer it. So guys, if you have 4 headings there, you know nothing about the essay. You've got 4 headings there, you already get 1A for attempting all of it. If you had the word introduction there, and even if you wrote Piet Pompey's likes to drink water underneath, it's completely wrong, that will still get you an L mark. If you wrote the word conclusion and it's completely wrong, you will still get that other L mark for just having the word conclusion there. So there you already have 3 free marks. Good. Now guys, the next A you will get if you have scored more than 16 for facts, and that's the other A mark. That's why it is there. Right, so that is actually 3 marks that we are giving away. Right, now guys, let's get to the conclusion. The word conclusion, of course, must be there. It only needs 1 fact on any of the 4 bullets that was asked, and of course a conclusion as a rule of thumb is a result. So let's look at the result. It is important that businesses function in an ethical and responsible manner when doing its day-to-day operations. Now, that's actually a very weak introduction or conclusion, but that will be good enough for 2 marks. Now, guys, you would also see, Mr. Edwards, if you don't mind hitting that button again, is there no L that's coming up?
Yep.
There's the L next to conclusion. Now, guys, that is just for the word conclusion that's there, and of course, a conclusion that was offered. Now, guys, now I'm going to tell you how we calculate the mark to get to 40. Now, the first F, you will always see in your business studies papers, there's this acronym called FLASO. The F, that the teacher draws it at the bottom of your question paper. The F stands for facts. Now, guys, the amount of facts that you can get the maximum out of any question, any essay question, is 32 for facts. Right. The next one is L. L stands for layout. That is if you had the word introduction there and the word conclusion there and something written underneath, you would get 2 L marks. Right, the next one is analysis. That's the A marks that I've explained to you. It's all the questions that you have attempted, even if you only put the headings there, and you have scored more than 16 marks. Sorry, I see it's still in Afrikaans. I'm very, very sorry. But if you scored more than 16 for facts, you will get the other A mark. Right, and then, guys, we get to a very stupid one, which is S. It stands for structure and synthesis. Guys, we assume that you're going to get 2 S's. The reason is you can only take away S's if something went terribly wrong with the essay. The first S we can take away if a person offered irrelevant facts. That's not facts that are wrong, it's facts that come from a completely different topic. That is an irrelevant fact, and therefore we can award a minus S, and that's only if a whole paragraph is actually irrelevant. We will then award a minus S. We assume that you will get both. Right, the next S you can lose if you only attempted one of the 4 questions in an essay question. So, with other words, attempted less than 50% of the question. But guys, it invariably almost never happens. So guys, there's another 2 free marks for you. You've got the 2 for having an introduction with something written underneath. That's the 2 L marks. You get 1 A mark for having all the headings there, and 2 S's because somewhere down the line you may have 1 correct answer. Then you will get both your S marks, and that is 5 free marks already. Right, now guys, the last one is the most difficult one that people always struggle with, and that's the O mark, and that stands for originality. Now guys, originality, I'm requiring 2 facts that come from the news. Right, now guys, when it comes from the news, it must also be recent. I use the word contemporary, and it must be relevant to a particular point that you are making. Now guys, in that case, let's say it's a news from Donald Trump that has got something to do with the essay that you are writing, and you use that to illustrate a point. We will draw an O in the left-hand margin. You need 2 examples in 2 different places in the essay in order to get your 2 originality marks. But guys, please go and watch the news. Please keep up to date with contemporary things, because people give away these marks. They've just given up on trying to get originality marks. Now guys, if you count up your facts plus the 2 for L, plus the 2 for A, plus the 2 for S, and the 2 for the O's, it will give you a mark out of 40. And that is the end of an essay question.
Ms. Van Zyl, I just wanted to elaborate on the originality. There's 1 or 2 things that I inform my learners is, if you're looking for the originality, please ensure that you put the words "for example," because that indicates to the marker that you are trying to gain access to those marks. Also, we should, as markers, be able to Google that, pop it into the browser, and be able to locate that. And just recently, we've started to inform the learners, if you're wanting to get that mark, also to give it a little bit more emphasis, is to make sure that you put the date as to when that took place, because then it's recent and you're showing some sort of validity to your originality mark. Right, so those are just a couple of tips if you are looking to get that mark.
Right.
All right.
Grade 11s, I thank you. Mr. Edwards, thank you. It was a very,
thank you
very
very
good
much, Mr.
evening
Hunter.
or a good afternoon. And guys, good luck for the exams.
Yeah, grade 11's all the very best for the coming exams, and we look forward to seeing you in grade 12 next year.